Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Real Life Health Show. I'm so excited about today's guest and also about the topic. So today's guest is Erica. Say hello, Erica.
Hello, everyone.
Erica, this is very special because I'm all into about health and longevity, and I met your grandfather. Your grandfather. Tell everybody how long your grandfather lived to.
My grandfather lived to be 114 years old. Actually, his birthday was on August 17th, and he died December 19th of 2015. So that would have made him, 114 in 2 months and like 28 days or something. So,
And
yeah.
the special thing about this is I met him when he was like 104, and when he was 108, I actually interviewed him. And I'm going to be playing part of those clips or even the whole interview today. But before I did that, I went to go look at his website to see what was happening. I have his book. His book's great. And you popped up, and he's your grandfather, and you're carrying on his message, or just not even his message, just his lifestyle. And it's just amazing. You're actively telling people about the memories you've had with him, and you have a new book you're working on based on those memories. And he already has 2 amazing books that's out. So I want to talk to you a little about that. Everybody, his name is Bernardo Lapalo. And if you see my show, you've seen his interview, but he was great. Now, I want to emphasize to everybody, he was not a raw vegan 100%, but he ate, majority of his diet was raw vegan foods. And he was very much into some superfoods. We'll hear about all of that when I interviewed him. He's going to talk about that. But Erica spent the last days with him, and she could tell you, because he lived longer than I was speaking to him for. So she could tell you up to like what he was doing and everything, and answer a lot of questions.
First of all, I was told by my father over 100 years ago that the first priority in life should be your health. And of course, he gave me a lot of advice, and I tried to follow it up to now. Eating properly, not eating too much, and the proper things I live on: fruit, vegetables, green vegetables more or less, and fish, and lots of juice. And of course, I eat in the daylight. I'm not much on night eating. I try to have my lunch, my breakfast after I have my walk, which is every morning, about 1.5 miles. And then behind that, I come back and I have my superfood and my fruit, 2 pieces of toast, whole wheat toast, and a cup of sassafras tea or cinnamon tea. Prevention is, my daddy says, it's much easier to prevent something than it is to cure it. So my reason for that is I was told that cinnamon was great for diabetes. And of course, I don't want to get diabetes, so I've been using cinnamon tea for a number of years now. And I find that it's very helpful, because 85% that people I talk with, they have diabetes, either 1 or 2. And I read an article some time ago that the average kid in America, by the time it's 12 years old, has number 1 diabetes and not even aware of it. That is because you go into the bank, you find lollipops. You go to the post office, they got to give the child so he will not cry, and so forth and so on. So they have number 1 diabetes before they even know anything about diabetes, can't even pronounce the word. Sure. So I've followed those laws that my father gave me until today. I still get up to have my walk. Exercise you can take. It's beautiful, but it's the cheapest. People don't seem to want to do it. Eating, they kill themselves with eating. All of it. I don't even want to go into these spots where they stop to kill themselves. If you have a regular time to eat, and not too much, and of course the proper diet, which is green vegetables, fruit, juice, and fish. I've been living on it for years. I was a chef on the liners for many years, and they used to laugh at me. Geez, this guy eats crazy. You never see him eat a piece of meat. Blah, blah, blah. I say, well, you may call it crazy, but it suits me. But all those fellas now are dead.
Was there a certain age where you said, this isn't just a normal thing here, this is pretty special?
I was about 23 years of age when I started to work on the George Washington. And I noticed that they didn't have anything which I had been accustomed to eating. And I bought my own stuff. I started with my cinnamon tea. I started with my regular vegetables that I ate before, because on ship they were fresh vegetables then. I'm talking about over 50 years ago, because I retired in '57, September the 7th. And I ate good for many years. Of course, we had a better fruit then because didn't have all the chemicals and whatnot in it it has now. Everything was fresh, more or less. Fruits we get from the tropics, which was around Jamaica and the coast of Cuba and down as far as Panama and back.
Just to give somebody an idea of your age, I remember when I was driving with you when we were hanging out last time, and you told me you knew the Yankees before they were called the Yankees.
Oh yes, oh yes, that's I certainly do. Well, I remember when Babe Ruth came to him before he came to him. Oh yes, I remember the Yankees. They were called the Highlanders. They named them the Yankees way after that.
So you saw Babe Ruth play baseball?
Well, Babe, I saw them all. Lou Gehrig, I was there when he retired. I was there when he came. I know the history of the baseball, the Yankees. As a matter of fact, I'm still a Yankee fan.
Wow.
I'll always be a Yankee fan.
Wow. So tell us, getting back to your health tips and everything else, you tell us you eat mostly fruits and vegetables and a little fish. Other than fish, do you eat any other animal products, such as any dairy or any meat?
No, I'll tell you. There's one meat that I eat, and that's about once a year. That's lamb. And of course I do that because of the fact it was served at the Lord's Supper. I don't know anywhere in the Bible where it mentions steak or chicken, or anything of that nature. All that lamb. As a matter of fact, I saw a show about a month ago, and I forgot the name of the show now, but it was showing how the meats and chickens and everything were raised in America. And if you saw that show, I don't think anybody would bother with meat anymore.
What about dairy products, such as milk or cheese?
No, I don't. I might have a little cheese once in a while, but that's once in a while, because we go back to moderation. You can have a steak once in a while. You can have a drink once in a while. But if you're going to crowd your system with it, it's not going to deal. I've never been sick. I've lived many years.
And what do you eat now, and how has that changed from when you were younger in terms of the amount of food?
It's about the same, really, because I eat more because I'm a man now as a child. But so far as eating, we had a certain time to eat, and we all sat down at the table to eat dinner together or lunch together. Well, not lunch so much, because I come home from school, and the housekeeper would fix me a salad and perhaps a baked apple. That was my lunch. We had dinner between 4 and 5 every day. That would be vegetable or fish, something of that. Sometimes it'd just be a vegetable plate, and another time we might have fish with it. But it was always green vegetable and fruit.
And how many times a day do you normally eat?
3 times, but my breakfast, as I told you earlier, that's very light. I might have a slice of whole wheat toast, some peanut butter. This is all organic. It even has nuts in it. And a cup of my cinnamon tea. That's it. Now I have a bowl of fruit, which is mostly mixed fruit. Cantaloupe. I love cantaloupe, and besides, cantaloupe has an awful lot of good in it for you, the system. Blueberries is at the top of the list for me. I eat blueberries every day. And the juice from perhaps on one orange. I squeeze the orange because I like the pulp. I eat fish about 3 times a week.
3 times a week you eat fish,
That is fresh fish, but now I may have a can of sardines, which is in olive oil or oil, or I may have tuna fish and make a salad out of that. But the salad is only onion, celery, and olive oil.
and the fish that you eat, other than the tuna fish and the sardines, what kind of fish do you eat?
Salmon. Sometimes I'll have flounder once in a while, which is fillet.
And when you eat the fish, how much in size would you say it is? Would you say it's 4 ounces, 8 ounces?
About 4 to 5 ounces.
So it's a small amount.
Yes, I don't eat much of it.
Now, do you take any supplements at all? Any vitamins or minerals or anything? I know you told me.
Well, I'll tell you about that. I met a gentleman quite a few years ago, Dr. Schultz, and he had through Dr. Christopher. I met him. Dr. Christopher, one of the greatest herbologists in the world. As a matter of fact, I went to his school, and so did Dr. Schultz. And he has a formula called it's Schultz's superfood. It was just Schultz's food, but now it's superfood because he improved it. And I'll tell you the truth, it works. It really works. Because it has every nutrient that the body needs. And of course, if you use that with 2 shots of echinacea, you'll never get a cold. I lived in New York, and in all years without a cold.
So how often do you do the superfood?
Every morning.
Every morning.
Never miss.
Could you give us a few non-diet related health tips?
Well, stress will kill you. So my daddy told me when I was a kid. In the Garden of Eden, when God left Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, he didn't leave no hamburgers, he didn't leave no hot dogs, or nothing like that, fried chicken or spare ribs. He left fruit and vegetables. So that hit me. Fruit and vegetables must be healthy. So the more I ate it, the better it tastes, I continued. As a matter of fact, as I can remember, I don't remember where I was reading in the Bible where anybody ate cooked food prior to the flood. After the flood, then they started. We got commercial and hungry for money, so they decided to change things. But it didn't change me too much because, as the Bible says, moderation. Daddy taught me all this. As a matter of fact, he gave me the 10th commandment. I still have it. It's regular now. He said, try to follow this as much as you possibly can. He says, I know you can't go all the way with it. He said, if 1/3 of the world would follow the 10th commandment, it would be a marvelous place to live. He said, that's why God said, he forgave you 99 times because he knew you were going to sin. And I thought about that. The older I got, the more I got involved in things he had told me when I was young. He said to me one time, you don't gamble, so what are you doing in a gambling joint? You don't drink, so what are you doing in a bar? You're married, so you got no business in a house with people. So he says, if you stay away from those places that the devil has everything out there for you to tempt you. And he gets you tempted. He knows whiskey will upset your brain and you're easy to be led. So stay away from that whiskey. Just eat vegetables and fruit, what God left into the Garden of Eden, and you'll be a healthy man. He says, you'll live a long time. And it's proven. I'm 108 and I feel good.
So how old did your dad live to?
98.
98.
98.
You ended up coming out with a book.
That's right. Eat less and live more. Oh, I must have been about 100, yes, I was 100. And my son-in-law, he had a business in Charlotte, and I was in North Carolina at the time. And I invited him over for lunch. He came over and brought a couple of friends in. I fixed lunch for him. So he says to me, you should write a book. So I said, well, why? Why should I write a book? He said, I'm looking at you in the kitchen. You're over 100, he said. Because I just had my 100th birthday. you're dancing around in the kitchen just like you did when I first met you 20 years ago. So I said, well, I feel good. And I think the results of that is the way I've lived till this time. So he says, you ever have a cold? I said, no, colds and things, that's not for me. I said, I do everything to prevent a cold. My father said, 1 ounce of prevention is worth 1,000 pounds of cure. I said, I heard it a lot of times since then, but the first man I heard say that was my daddy. 1 ounce of prevention is worth 1,000 pounds. So you don't get it, you don't have to cure it. So I've fought all my life to keep from getting these things by eating the way I told you, drinking plenty of water, and getting my rest. Rest is very important. I used to talk to the fellows about their feet. Feet is very important. My daddy said to me, keep your feet clean of dirt and of crust and whatnot. I said, well, how do you do that, Daddy? He said, your feet are tied up all day long in a tight shoe and socks. They can't breathe. He said, the skin has to breathe. If you keep it clean and put olive oil on it, he says, you will not get wrinkles. And aside from that, he said, I'm going to tell you, don't shave yet. I don't think you'll be shaving soon because I didn't shave until I was 20-something. He said, after you shave, never mind the sweet stuff that they put on your face, smells sweet. He said, take a dab of olive oil and rub it on constantly. He said, it doesn't take much. He said, it'll go in. Just keep rubbing. He said, your skin will stay smooth for a long while. I said, you see, you look at my skin now, and the average man, you find half my age. I said, he's starting to wrinkle or something drying out. Mine is not dry at all. I still use olive oil. And about the feet, coming back to that, I used to have to bathe my feet every night. He said, told the housekeeper while he's studying his lesson, we should get that tub and put lukewarm water just above the temperature of his blood and put some Castile soap in it. They don't have that around, I don't think, anymore. Castile soap. And he said, let him soak while he's studying his lesson. And by the time he's finished studying his lesson, you take a pump stone and take all the. She said, but doctor, he has no dead skin on there yet. She said, I don't want it to ever get there. And if you take the pump stone and rub it off and then dry it, get some olive oil, I'll give you some. You don't need much, he said, and rub it good. And then he had a pair of white socks. He said, put these socks on. They were half socks. They didn't come all the way up. He said, that would prevent the sheet from getting greasy. He said, it wouldn't get greasy anyway. The olive oil goes right in, and it does. You try it sometime. You rub it, and it goes right in.
So you have that tip and all these other tips in your wonderful book and your book just came out like last year.
That's right.
So it has 107 years of your knowledge in that book.
That's right.
Age Less, Live More. And recommend everyone get this book because you have pictures in there of how you grew up.
That's right.
Wonderful stories from your dad.
That's right.
And and it's an amazing book. And
it really is. Really is.
Yeah. Let's give your 3 top health tips for the viewers out there.
Well, number 1 is keep your colon clean. Keep your colon clean, everything else in the body can do its job. The kidneys can do it, the liver can do its job properly, the kidneys can do its job, and of course the liver, that's the purifier. If you keep your colon clean, the liver can do its job properly, and if you don't do it, if you don't do what I told you to do, what's going to happen? You're going to get sick. And of course there is this formula that I told you about called Dr. Schultz's superfood. That is terrific. But you have to take it in the right manner. You mix it with fruit in the morning and juice. It doesn't have to be organic. It's wonderful if you do get organic, but if you can't, blend it together with a squirt of echinacea plus. And I guarantee you will stay well on and on and on. It has worked for me. Worked for my whole family, as a matter of fact.
So tip number 1 would be keep your colon clean.
That's number
Tip
1.
number 2 is Dr. Schultz Superfood.
That's right.
And what's tip number 3?
A regular eating, and do not bother with this. The worst thing you can do in the morning, you end up having a cup of coffee and donuts. It kills you right off. That first thing you know, you got diabetes. You don't even realize.
Sure. So tip number 3 is to avoid fast food restaurants.
That's probably, and not too much. And stay away from going to the theaters late at night and stopping off having a meal before you go home and go to sleep. Have your meal, your dinner that you're going to sleep on between the hour of 5 and no later than 7, because you go to bed around 9 or 9:30. So I wouldn't suggest that you pack yourself with anything. You can drink water, that's perfectly all right. You can even have a cup of green tea, that wouldn't hurt you. But packing your food with your stomach with a lot of heavy food, like people go and have steaks and chops and roast beef and all that kind of stuff, it's too late at night. You're laying there, you're not exercising. And what happens? You wake up in the morning, you feel soggy. But if you eat like I tell you, you wake up in the morning feeling good. But try to do your feet practically every night.
Okay.
That's important.
Great.
And they take you around. You can't do anything without your feet, you know. And next is your eyes. Take care of that, because without eyes and feet, you're lost.
And your vision and your eyesight and your hearing is excellent at this age.
I have an examination every year. I just had an examination 2 months ago. And the doctor examined me all the way through. PSA was 3. He said he's been practicing medicine for 30 years. He never saw a man of 108 years of age or a person with a body like mine. Of course, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to drop dead the next minute. But you got a better chance than the guy that overloads his stomach with crap.
Now, there are some people out there that have lived over 100 years old that smoke and drink and so on.
Yes.
And what would you say? Like,
well, they're not healthy, because they cannot get a cup of coffee to their mouth without spilling half of it on them. My hand is just as level now as ever. They're not one all. Imagine when you do that. That's no good. Your family feels sorry for you. Your friends feel sorry for you because you tried to have a cup of coffee, and when you wind up this, your whole is wet. You got to change it. If not, you have to have a bib in front of you.
Sure. So you read my new book, The Daylight Diet, about not eating.
Terrific. It took me an hour, and I sat there and I read it and I watched it. Oh, it's wonderful. I think it's marvelous.
Great, great. Well, thank you for that. And so tell us, here's a copy of your book. You can hold that up to the camera. And it actually says on there, it says the title, Age Less, Live More, at 107, but now you're 108. So right. It's amazing. So, you know, and do you have any idea what age you think you're going to live to? Or
I'm shooting for 120. Everyone asks me when I go to church, how old do you think? I say, well, I'm trying to give Abraham a run for his money. I think he made 140 or something.
Sure. And just turn to the back of your book there.
All the history of me is there.
All the history in the back of the book and everything else. And it's just a wonderful book. And now what we're gonna do is we're gonna show Fernando. Now he's just sitting down and relaxing, but he doesn't need to be sitting down like most 108-year-old people. What I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna break away for a second and we're gonna remove his chair and have him walk towards the camera. So you're gonna see this man walks better than most people at like 70 years old, and he looks like he's 60. So this isn't just somebody just talking talk. He's really walking the talk. So we're just going to break away from here for a second. Here he is, Bernal. Come on, look at him. All right, look at that. This man is 108 years old, and he's in great shape, great health, and well, thank you very much, Fernando, and we'll see you again soon. And
Have a great day and a great royal life.
so, welcome. What are the most common questions you have about your amazing grandfather?
Everyone wants to know what he did every day. It's always the same questions. What were the secret to his longevity? But that took the form, it got very specific back in 2016, the beginning of 2016. After my grandfather passed away, I stayed in Arizona because there were different things that had to be taken care of for his estate. And there's a lot of red tape in Arizona. But anyway, we got through that. And then my, he's become my friend, Mark Sirkowitz, who was a good buddy of my grandfather's, used to drive him around to all the Kangen water shows and hang out with him and just wanted to learn as much as he could for him. One day, Mark came to me and said, could you just type out for me what Fernando did every day? You know, when he got up, when he ate, what he ate, how much he ate, what his exercise routine is, you know, when he went to bed, just all of it. And I said, yeah, sure, no problem. So I typed it up and I handed it to Mark and he said, thank you very much. This is great. This is really inspiring. This is going to help me a lot. And I was like, of course, no problem. And then about a week later, Mark came back to me and said, hey, Erica, do you have any more copies of the daily menu and regime that you gave me? Because this one, and this one, they want a copy also. And I was like, yeah, I can make more copies for you, not a problem. So I made some more copies and I gave him like, I don't know, maybe 10 or something. I thought 10, that should be fine. You know, that's all he needs, right? And then it just turned into something where when I was giving this sort of goodbye lecture, because I was leaving Arizona to come to California, I made a stack of those and they just flew out of there. And so I thought, wow, you know, people really need a blow by blow breakdown. That's what they're really interested in. So that is definitely the most frequently asked question is, you know, what did he do every day?
Now,
Hour by hour.
now is this list in his book, or it is in one of his books, this particular list?
It can be extrapolated from his book. If you actually read the book very carefully, if you look at the back chapter, the last chapter in Age Less, Live More, Achieving Health and Vitality at 107, chapter is called A Day in the Life. And in that chapter, he describes what he does, about when he gets up and, you know, his bathing routine and his use of extra virgin olive oil and exercise and, you know, what he eats. And he even talks about his favorite soups and, you know, he just kind of shares kind of a day in the life. Of course, every day in everyone's life is a little bit different. He's stuck to his routine, but he tries to give some insight in that. But what I quickly began to realize is that it seemed to me that people weren't reading that chapter, or if they were reading that chapter, it was for some reason hard for them to follow along, you know, to really grasp it. So I decided to write a book. I'm in the process of writing a book based on, you know, his daily regime and menu as the guide played against my memories, things he shared with me, the times that we hung out, how I picked his brain about different things, and try and give people a feeling of Fernando as a three-dimensional human being, because I think that that's really important, you know, to flesh out. He was extremely disciplined. There's no doubt about it. That was everything to him.
Absolutely.
And obeying his father's word was everything. He didn't care what anyone said. He was not going to not listen to what his father said. They had a very, very strong bond. But that's what I've been working on. And so I have If anyone wants to subscribe, I have a MailChimp dedicated email list just for that. And I think I have about around 10 or even a dozen, past issues that people can read in the newsletter. And then if they'd like to subscribe, they can look at the other tab and put in their email address and stay up to date with those things until eventually it takes on book form.
Yeah. So I interviewed him when he was 108, and and how long did you say he lived to?
He lived to be 114 and a few months. He passed away December 19th, 2015 in Tempe, Arizona,
Now, I
at
want
home.
people to understand he wasn't just an old man. He was getting around pretty well. He was very sharp. So when we hear somebody that age, I mean, I see people on the news that age, like in wheelchairs. No, this wasn't Fernando. He was an amazing man. So, and he passed away naturally, what people would call, I guess, old age, but it wasn't anything extreme.
I mean, I don't think people really understand the process of death very well. And I think that this is part of the, kind of mystery that surrounds it, because when people die in America, they're kind of wheeled away to another room, and no one really mostly people are not there, when their loved ones die and when their elders die. People are put in nursing homes, and then you just get word that they passed on. But before I describe what happened, I want to say that literally the day that he died, he did the same thing that he always did. He got up, he took his bath, he anointed his body in olive oil, he got dressed, he went out to the kitchen, he made a superfood smoothie, he made his oatmeal, he received a guest who actually she brought her elderly mother with her, who was actually younger than my grandfather. My grandfather was more spry than her mother. She was a lovely woman, but it was still amazing. I mean, he was about 20 years older than this lady, and he was like physically younger than her. Received them, sold them some superfood, had some green tea, and then just checked out. So to describe what happened to him, there's a couple of different levels. I don't want to just be mechanical about it, but there's a few different things that were going on there. My mother, his oldest daughter, and they were very, very close, had passed away May 25th of 2014. So she had passed away about a year, a little bit more than a year before that. And that was a very, very big blow to Fernando. I mean, he'd survived the death of a son. He'd survived the death of 3 wives. He actually was married 3 times. His first wife died in childbirth. But when my mother died, excuse me, I'm a little emotional about it. That's when he aged. That's when his hair became gray. That's when he just was really grief-stricken.
And how old?
And he was, when she passed away, he was 113, or was about to be 113. And he'd always had, kind of, well, actually starting from about the age of 100, which is also humorous, I've been thinking about that, is when he sort of started having bigger birthday parties and sort of started becoming, having notoriety around that, and just like hundreds of people coming to that. But that year he told me, I'm not having a birthday party this year because people are going to ask me about her, and I don't want to talk about it because it just makes me very, very, depressed and sad, and I don't want to talk about it. So we didn't have a birthday thing that year. So just on a very, like on a very personal note, because this is my flesh and blood, my mother, and my grandfather, and I'm kind of like sandwiched between the two of them. I saw that change. I know that he went up to stay with a friend and stay in the country and be close to nature and kind of look at the stars and try and rejuvenate himself, close to nature and close to God at that time. But I think at that point, he wasn't really so interested in living much longer. One of his mottos was, I'm making plans to live. I know I got to die sometime. He was always saying that. I'm making plans to live. I know I got to die sometime. And the night before he passed away, we'd actually sat up talking very late. Well, late for him, midnight, which was like, very late for him because he was usually in bed by 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock latest. He was out making speech. And he said to me, oh, well, you didn't know this, but your mother and I had plans because my mother was living in Paris before she had passed away because she was doing an artistic project. And he said, yeah, I was going to go move and live with your mom in Paris, and we were going to have a ball. I was going to go live with her because Fernando, for those of you who are not familiar with the story, he studied the culinary arts in Paris in the late 1920s when the Sorbonne had a college for cooking. That's how he became a chef. That's how he became a 5-star chef. So it was kind of going to come sort of full circle, and they were going to do that together. So I learned a lot of different things with him that night, before he left.
Wow. Wow.
Anyway, to answer the other part of your question, or the other aspect of this question, he had always said that if he ever got to the point where his body or his vehicle, because he considered to be the body to be a machine, a very sophisticated machine, and to be a temple of God, but a machine nonetheless. But he always used to tell people, take care of your temple, take care of it every day. But he said, and there was actually a BBC documentary on his lifestyle, which you may or may not have seen, Paul, which is very cool if you can get your hands on it on BBC One, where he was showing the people that were interviewing, if he ever got like this, he just didn't want to be around. So he had been experiencing a little incontinence. And, I'd sort of mentioned it to him, and someone else had sort of mentioned it to him. And so that he thought about that, he didn't really say anything, but he thought about that, and I'm sure he was thinking, was this really in alignment with how he wanted to live his life? Did he really want to spend the last year of his life, wearing adult diapers in the event of some incident, Overall, he was fine, but he was 114 after all. So that there was that. What ended up happening was we were in we were like in the living room, and I asked him, he was sitting in his lazy boy chair, and I asked him a question. And when he answered me, this is like, I think it was a Wednesday. Was it a Wednesday? Was that, maybe it was a Monday, but it was the week, that he was making his exit essentially. So I asked him a question, he replied to me, but the answer was unintelligible. But I could tell from the look in his eye that he thought that he was speaking clearly and that I could understand what he was saying. So I looked at him and I said, "What was that, Grandpa? I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you said." And he tried to repeat it again, and it still wasn't clear. And I thought, okay, something's going on here, and I need to get him to the hospital. So I did. And once he was at the hospital, and I got in the ambulance with him, and we rode over there. And then, of course, on the way over there, somehow he kind of like came back to his normal self and charmed the ambulance drivers who couldn't believe how old he was. And then once we got in there, he was sort of like, "Why am I here? Why are you guys making a big fuss over me? I feel fine." I want to go home, you know? And I was like, okay, Grandpa, listen, I think that we should just run a few tests because, you know, I asked you a question earlier, couldn't really understand what you were saying. Let's just, you know, follow through. And then after that's done, yeah, okay, you can go home. And so we had a great time there actually in the ER with all the doctors and everyone. So I left, he spent the night. The doctor gave me a call and said, uh, your grandfather just had a spike in his blood pressure. And when that happens, you know, one of the things that can happen is that it can make it, um, you know, difficult to communicate, you know, to be understood and to understand. I was like, oh, really? And he said, yeah, we ran some tests and we checked his urinary tract, and it looks like he has you know, a small bladder infection, and this is common, you know, for older people. So we gave him some antibiotics and we gave him some medication, you know, to bring down his blood pressure. And we'd like to keep him overnight. Is that okay with you? And I said, yes, absolutely. Keep him overnight. Whatever little infections there, let's knock it out. And I want to make sure that he's stable. Okay. So the next day, I get a phone call from the doctor who's got this kind of amused, uh, you know, timbre to his voice. And he's like, Erica? And I was like, yes. And he's like, this is Dr. So-and-so, and I'm just calling because your grandfather wants to check out of the hospital. He wants to leave and he's trying to get me to release him from the hospital because he says he feels fine, but I thought I should call you and see what you think. And I just had to chuckle because I was just like, that is just so Grandpa. He feels okay. You know, he doesn't want to stay there. So I said, well, what's going on? You know, how's the blood pressure? How's the infection going? And he said, well, you know, the infection is better. We're giving his medication, but his blood pressure is a little bit elevated. And I said, let's keep him there another night, because how stupid would it be that you've almost got it, you know, down to where it should be, and then he comes home and then he ends up checking out because, you know, we didn't follow through and just spend one more night. They said, okay, I just wanted to check with you. I said, fine, I'll be by to pick him up, you know, tomorrow at noon or whatever time it was.
Mhm.
So the next day, I get in a cab and I go to Banner Medical and finally find Grandpa. That hospital is enormous, right? So I finally locate him in the room. And of course, when I get there, he is fully dressed. And actually, he's got his back to me because he's just hanging up the telephone. And he turns around and he says, I was just trying to call you on the telephone. Where have you been? It's taken you it's taken you forever to get here. I said, I'm sorry, Grandpa, but this hospital's kind of huge, but here I am. Let's go. So he was packed and he was ready to go.
Yeah, wow, wow, wow.
So
Well, what I wanted to say here, he looked amazing for his age, so much so that people found it hard to believe, and some people
right.
questioned that. So I want to say I'm going to put links below this video to Erica's the newsletter and also to his website and so on. And on there is the proof that you know of his validating his true age. So I just want to say that because he does. It is hard to believe because he looks so young for his age. But you have the proof on there, and so it's there. So anyone that questions it can see that. But it's and I really pray everyone takes the wisdom of this man and use it to benefit their own lives to one degree or another. And I thank you for doing this work.
You're welcome. I mean, I'm 59 years old now, and you know, most people they're like, "What? I thought you were like 40." You know, I mean, most of my friends, because they're livelier, are in their 40s because I hate to say it, but quote, people my age, unquote, are like not so fun. You know, they're not so fun and they're not, you know, they're not as active. But I want to continue with this anecdote of what happened. So at any rate, we got back and he, was taking the medication and he was feeling better. And so he went out actually to go to a play. By Wednesday, by I think it was Wednesday evening, I believe. We come back Wednesday, or maybe it was Thursday or Friday. At any rate, he had been invited to go see Black Nativity that was playing in Scottsdale, which is a play by Langston Hughes. And so he got all dressed up and everything, and his friends came to pick him up, and off he went to the theater. And, it was great. And he came back and we sat up and we talked until midnight. And then I was like, Grandpa, it's midnight. That's really late for you. He was like, oh my God, you're right. He just like got up, walked down the hallway, ding, and closed the door and went to bed. Okay, hilarious. So because the next day he had another social engagement. As I said, there was this woman that had been, kind of following his lifestyle for many, many years, and she wanted to bring her mother, and they wanted more superfood. And he used to distribute Dr. Schultz's superfood, of course, in person, and Kangen water and all of that. But because he had stayed up so late the night before, he was a little tired. Like I said, he was normally in bed by 9 p.m. out cold. So I, when I got up that morning, because I could smell the oatmeal that he had cooked, I already knew he had a superfood. But when I stuck my head out of my room, I didn't see Grandpa anywhere. And I was like, that's odd, because he's usually in this chair, watching his programs or reading the Bible or something. So I went back to his room and kind of knocked on the door and opened the door. And I was like, Grandpa, are you okay? And he was under the covers, just like, yeah, I'm okay. I just feel a little sleepy. And I said, yeah, well, you stayed up really late last night. Like midnight is like, 4 a.m. for me. I said, well, I'm going to let you rest, but about a half an hour before your guests are supposed to arrive, I'll give you the warning so you can get yourself together, before they come over. And he said, okay, fine. So I did that. He was just amazing, Paul. So when I went back to the room, to knock on the door, say, okay, it's time to get ready, he was already sitting up. He was already sitting up and he was tying his cufflinks by himself. He was already dressed. And I said, do you need to bathe? He goes, oh no, I already took my bath this morning. I've already anointed myself in olive oil. I'm good. Okay. So he was just like, reading, like health and reading different things. I said, okay, Grandpa. So they came over, we had a visit, and then I started to get a little anxious because I could tell he was tired. He was such a good host and had such good social skills that he wouldn't shoo people away. But I kind of let it be known to the mother, who was old school. She was like in her late 80s, that he'd been up late the night before and that I thought, maybe he should kind of chill out a little bit. And she's like, that's all right, baby. We're gonna go. We're gonna go. Don't you worry. We're gonna go soon. Don't you worry. And I was like, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Okay. So they leave. I'll be damned if a half an hour later, someone didn't knock on the door. So someone else knocked on the door. It was Dr. Colo and his daughter were knocking on the door, who had heard about his little stint in the hospital and the high blood pressure. And so they were concerned and worried. So they wanted to come over and check on him, which they did. But after about a half an hour, I thanked them very much. And I said, because he needs to rest. He was just in the theater. There was already someone here this morning. It's now like 3 o'clock or whatever it is, 3:30 in the afternoon. I mean, he's great, but he's still 114. So they left. And then he went to turn on the television set to relax as a lazy boy and watch one of his programs. But when he went to turn on the television set, it wouldn't turn on. And so I realized that he was trying to, he was using the phone, because the phone and the remote look similar. He was using the phone to try and turn on the TV, and that's why the TV wasn't turning on. So I said, oh no, Grandpa, this is for the phone. This is the remote for the TV. So I gave him that. And then I, kind of walked away and did whatever. And then TV still wasn't going on. And then because he was confused, and so I went back and gave it to him again, and then by the third time, I just thought, just turn on the television set for him, So while this is, sort of while this is transpiring, I'm realizing that my grandfather is not clear and sharp like he normally is. So now I'm starting to go, oh boy, now something's going on here. And then uh when he sat down in the chair, he just didn't seem as clear to me. And then I said to him, Grandpa, it's time for you to take your blood pressure medication because you're supposed to take it, every so many hours. And he said, oh, again, and I'll never forget how he looked at me. Like I brought over the pill, with the water, and he looked up at me like a child. He I don't know, he just had a way about him. So I gave that to him, and he took it, and he did not like taking pills, Paul. That was not his thing. And then I left the room, he was watching this program. I left the room, everything seemed fine. And then while I was in my room doing what I was doing, I heard him clearing his throat. And, I kind of cocked my head and listened. And then it sort of went on for too long. And then I just remembered, because see, I've been trained by my grandfather, if you understand me, because I'd really grown up at his knee. And I thought to myself, that is not a cough. That's a death rattle. So when I stepped into the living room, he was sitting in his lazy boy chair, upright, spine erect, hands clenched like this. His head was slightly down, and it was like this gargling sound. And I realized he was in the process of leaving his body. And I just, two things were going on, On one level, I'm analyzing what's going on because my grandfather had taught me so many things. So I could recognize what was going on a physical level. But of course, on an emotional level, I was very upset because I knew this was it. So I called I called 911, and I described what was happening because it seemed to me that he was having, quote, a heart attack, unquote, and they said, okay, get him out of the chair, lay him on the ground, do the, the move to keep the
CPR,
heart
yeah.
beating, where do the CPR, and don't worry, someone is coming, but you just do that until someone arrives. And they got there very quickly. They were wonderful, wonderful people. But, before they could arrive, I saw the light go out of his eyes. I heard this kind of last breath, and he was gone.
Wow.
And it was a privilege, and it was also, well, if anyone is interested in the death process and kind of what that's like, I just remember looking, I'm the witness, like looking at this thing, and I remember thinking, wow, just like they say, it's like just like the things I'd heard about it, what happens when the soul leaves the body. It was just like that. And then next thing I knew, the door was flying open and the firemen were coming in, and they were, cutting his shirt and cutting his pants, as I guess the idea is to help him breathe, and putting on the electrode, nodes, and, doing all that stuff. And then we took him to the hospital, and I waited in the waiting room, and a very sad doctor came out to tell me I'm sorry, but he's no longer with us.
Wow.
And
Well,
that's what happened.
well, I thank you for sharing that so people can kind of it'll answer a lot of questions people were wondering maybe what happened to this amazing man. But you are getting his books out there. You're getting his information out there. You're getting the stories out there, uh, uh, and just you're doing a wonderful job with it. You're on social media. I'm going to put all those links below the video. Your newsletter is updating people about these amazing stories and memories you had of Fernando. So I want everyone to get the books. You can go get them. The links are below. They're wonderful. I remember reading the Age Less, Live More book, and I knew him when he wrote it. When he was writing it. So it's great that he got it on paper. I was so excited because longevity, like I started saying, is my key. I want to help people help themselves, and that's what he did. And I have so many memories of just calling him up and talking to him a long time. He loved to talk, and I'll share some of those in the future. But I want to thank you for your time tonight. I know you're super busy, but keep up the great work and what you're doing.
Thank you so much, Paul. This is timely because his birthday is next week, August 17th, 2022. He would have been 121. So I'm sure that he is smiling and is like very, very grateful that you had me on today. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Nature's wealth, good for your health. This is the Raw Life Health Show. Raw Life, brighten up your life.